There are bars that imprison the body, and there are bars that imprison the soul. Marcos stood in front of an iron gate. It wasn't the first time he had faced metal bars separating him from the world. But this time was different. On the other side, there were no cold cells and empty stairs. On the other side, dozens of eyes were watching him. Eyes of abandoned animals, forgotten, rejected. He knew that look. He had seen the same one in the fog mirrors of prison for years. Have you ever stopped to think, what defines a person? Their mistakes? Their past? Or their choices from this moment on? This is the story of a man society had discarded. A man whose name carried the weight of a prisoner number. A man no one believed could change. And it is also the story of dozens of animals the world threw away. Wounded, frightened creatures considered too much of a problem to be loved. What happens when two worlds of pain meet? When the one everyone judges as lost finds those everyone considers irredeemable? The answer will surprise you. It will move you. And maybe, just maybe, it will make you rethink everything you believe about second chances. Because this is not just a story about an ex-prisoner. It is not just a story about shelter animals. It is a story about redemption, about compassion, about discovering that sometimes the most wounded are exactly the ones who know how to love in the purest way. Get ready, because what you are about to hear will touch your heart in ways you did not expect. 8 years earlier, Marcos was a different name. He was a number. He was a statistic. He was everything society points to and says, "See? I told you so." He wasn't born dreaming of crime. No one is. He was born in a neighborhood where opportunities were as rare as hope, where wrong choices were easier than the right ones, where survival spoke louder than conscience. The first time Marcos stole, he was 17. It wasn't to buy drugs or luxury. It was to put food on the table for a sick mother and 2 younger siblings. That doesn't justify it. It never justifies it, but explains how good people can do bad things when they are desperate. One thing led to another. A small theft became robbery. Robbery became involvement with dangerous people. And before he realized it, Marcos was inside a car on the run, sirens howling behind him, his life collapsing in real time. The sentence was clear: 8 years. 8 years away from the sun, from family, from freedom. 8 years to think about what he had done. 8 years carrying the weight of shame. Inside prison, Marcos saw men turn into monsters. He saw violence become routine. He saw hope die in the eyes of young men who entered at 20 and would leave old on the inside at 30. He promised himself he would be different, that he would use that time to change. He attended every course available, read every book he could get his hands on, worked in silence, kept his head down, counted the days. But there was something no course, no book, no good intention could change. The look on people's faces when they discovered his past. His mother visited him at first. Then the visits became less frequent. Her illness worsened. She died 6 months before he got out. Marcos couldn't be there. He couldn't say goodbye. He couldn't tell her he was trying to be the son she deserved. His siblings stopped writing. Not out of anger, but out of shame. The whole neighborhood knew. The younger one's school knew. It was easier to pretend he didn't exist. And that was how Marcos learned the cruelest lesson of prison. The bars that imprison the body are temporary. But the bars society builds around ex-prisoners, those can last forever. When he finally earned parole for good behavior, he walked out through the penitentiary gates with a bag of belongings, 200 reis in assistance money, and a certainty that hurt more than any beating he had taken inside. No one was waiting for him. No one believed in him. No one wanted to give a chance to the man he had become. And worst of all, he himself wasn't sure he believed in himself. Because freedom, true freedom, requires much more than walking through a prison gate. And Marcos was about to discover that on the outside, prisons are invisible, but far more cruel. Marcos's first night of freedom was in a municipal shelter. Thin mattress, musty smell, constant noise. Ironically, it wasn't that different from prison. But there was one fundamental difference. In prison, everyone there was in the same situation. In the shelter, Marcos was the ex-prisoner. And everyone knew it. In the first days, he tried to reintegrate. He woke up early, took buses to different neighborhoods, handed out printed resumes from a cheap internet cafe. 40 resumes the first week, 50 the second, 0 responses. When he did get an interview, the conversation started well. He was polite, articulate, showed a desire to work. But then came the inevitable question. And what did you do for the last 8 years? Marcos tried to lie once. He made up a story about informal work in another city. He got the job. It lasted 3 days. Someone searched social media, found old news articles. He was fired immediately, without explanation, with looks of disgust. After that, he decided to be honest. He talked about prison, about change, about wanting to start over. Expressions changed. Smiles disappeared. Promises of "we'll call you" never came true. One day, after yet another rejection, Marcos was sitting at a bus stop when a woman sat beside him with a small child in her arms. The child smiled at him. That innocent smile children give to strangers. Marcos smiled back. The mother immediately pulled the child closer, stood up, and moved to another stop. The look she gave him wasn't normal fear. It was the look of someone seeing a monster. Marcos didn't know how she could know about his past. But at that moment, he realized something devastating. It didn't matter. He carried on his face, in his posture, in his donated clothes, a stigma that screamed danger, even in silence. Weeks turned into months. The assistant's money ran out. Marcos managed to get some odd jobs in construction, temporary work where they didn't ask many questions. He earned enough to pay for the shelter and eat once a day. But the emptiness was unbearable. At night, lying on that thin mattress, Marcos asked himself what the purpose was. He had served his sentence. He had tried to change. He had tried to do everything right. And yet, he was alone, still invisible to those who didn't see him as a threat, still carrying chains no one could see. But that weighed more than any metal handcuffs. Prison taught Marcos how to survive. But freedom was teaching him something much worse, that surviving is not the same as living. He began to walk, long walks with no destination, trying to tire his body enough for his mind to stop thinking, try to feel something beyond emptiness. It was on one of those walks, 3 months after leaving prison, that Marcos turned a corner and came across something unexpected. An iron gate, a faded sign, abandoned animal shelter, volunteers welcome. And through the bars, dozens of eyes watching. Dogs, cats, some injured, others simply waiting. Marcos stood there for almost 10 minutes, staring into those eyes. And for the first time in months, he felt someone looking at him without judgment, without knowing who he was, without caring about what he had been. His hand touched the cold gate, and something inside him, something that had been dormant for a very long time, began to awaken. Marcos pushed the gate slowly. The rust creaked, as if it too were hesitant to let him in. The shelter was bigger than it looked from the outside. An old property, probably an abandoned house someone had turned into a refuge. Improvised kennels were spread across the yard. Some were just wooden and wire enclosures. Others were old metal cages. And the animals, God, the animals. There was a German shepherd in the corner, lying with his head between his paws. Deep scars marked his muzzle. When Marcos approached, the dog growled, not out of aggression, but fear. 3 cats huddled together in a cardboard box. One of them had only 3 legs. Another was so thin that bones showed beneath the tangled fur. A small mixed-breed dog, probably a puppy, wouldn't stop trembling. His big eyes followed Marcos's every movement as if expecting a blow at any moment. Marcos knew that look. He had seen on the faces of new prisoners. He had felt it himself on the first night in his cell. It was the look of someone who has learned that the world hurts, of someone who has learned not to trust, of someone who has given up on expecting anything good. "Can I help?" Marcos turned around. A woman in her 50s was watching him cautiously, hands dirty with soil, stained apron, a tired but firm expression. Her name was Dona Helena, he would learn later, and she had carried that shelter on her shoulders for more than 15 years. I saw the sign. About volunteers. Helena evaluated him in silence. The kind of silence that weighs. The kind that judges. Do you have experience with animals? No, but I have time, and I want to help. Her look didn't change. Marcos knew what she was thinking. The worn clothes, the unshaven beard, the posture of someone carrying invisible weight. She probably thought he would steal something, or disappear on the first hard day. This isn't easy. It's not just petting puppies. It's cleaning feces, dealing with bites, watching animals die, even when you do everything right. It's heavy, dirty work with no glamour at all. Marcos nadie. Imagine. And I can't pay anything. We survive on donations. We barely manage to buy food. I don't want money. Then what do you want? Marcos looked around. At the kennels. At the forgotten animals. At that piece of land that smelled like hope and abandonment at the same time. A place to go. Something to do. Maybe to feel useful. Helena studied him for another moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. All right. Start tomorrow, 7 in the morning. Bring gloves if you have them. And prepare your stomach. There's a sick kennel that smells worse than you can imagine. Marcos could hardly believe it. Someone had said yes. Someone had given a chance without asking questions. He came back the next day, and the next, and the next. In the first weeks, Helena barely spoke to him. She gave short instructions, watch from a distance, always alert. Marcos didn't mind. He did everything he was told. Cleaned kennels, carried bags of food, washed water and food bowls. The work was hard, exactly as Helena had warned. There were days when the stench was unbearable. Days when he got bitten by traumatized animals. Days when he returned to the shelter so exhausted he collapsed onto the mattress without even eating dinner. But there was something different, something Marcos hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The animals didn't know who he was. They didn't know he had been in prison. They didn't care about his past, his choices, his mistakes. They only knew that he came every day, that he brought food and water, that he cleaned their spaces, that, little by little, he began to talk to them in a low voice while he worked. And Marcos realized something that would change everything. Those animals had been discarded, abandoned, judged as problems or too difficult. Society had turned its back on them, just as it had turned its back on him. They were the same, rejected, wounded, waiting for a second chance that might never come. And it was at that moment, kneeling beside a dog who trembled whenever someone approached, that Marcos felt something breaking inside him. It wasn't despair. It wasn't pain. It was something he thought he had lost forever. It was empathy. And the ability to feel empathy is the first step toward feeling human again. 2 months after starting at the shelter, Marcos did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He stopped looking for a formal job. It wasn't giving up. It was a choice. The money from the odd construction jobs he did on weekends barely covered the shelter and basic food. But it was enough. And the rest of his time, all of it, he would dedicate to the shelter. Dona Helena thought he was crazy. Marcos, you need to stabilize yourself. Get a real job. Build your life. And what if this is my life? At least for now. But this doesn't take you anywhere. It takes me here, every day, and maybe that's enough. The truth was that Marcos had discovered something rare. A place where his presence mattered. Where waking up in the morning had a purpose beyond simply surviving. He started arriving earlier. Sometimes at 6 in the morning, before Helena even showed up. He organized materials, prepared the animals' meals, made basic repairs to the kennels using skills he had learned from construction gigs. He didn't expect thanks. He didn't expect recognition. He did it because it needed to be done. Because for the first time in years, he felt part of something. But not everyone was happy. Marina, another regular volunteer at the shelter, made it clear from the start that she didn't trust him. She avoided being alone near Marcos. She checked the supplies every time he left, as if expecting something to go missing. One day, when Helena wasn't there, Marina confronted him. I know who you are. Marcos froze. He was cleaning the puppy kennel. What do you mean? I saw your face in an old newspaper article. You were in prison. Armed robbery. That's true. And you think you can just show up here and no one will care? I don't expect people not to care. I expect to do good enough work that my presence speaks louder than my past. Marina didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. She kept watching him, suspicion still in her eyes. Marcos could have given up. He could have disappeared to avoid conflict. But something had changed in him. He wouldn't run anymore. He wouldn't quit anymore. So he kept going, day after day, week after week. On rainy days, when no one else showed up, Marcos was there. He covered the kennels with old tarps, dried the soaked animals, made sure everyone had a dry place to sleep. When a large donation of dog food arrived, he was the only one who stayed late organizing everything in the small storage room, creating a system that made daily work easier. A kitten arrived with a serious injury to its paw. Helena didn't have money for a veterinarian that week. Marcos took the pay from a construction job he had done and paid for the consultation. He didn't tell anyone. Helena only found out later when the veterinarian mentioned it. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. Marina still didn't fully trust him, but she stopped checking the supplies. She started saying good morning. Small, but it was something. Other occasional volunteers began to accept his presence. Some even talked to him, asked his opinion about the animals. And Donna Helena began to smile when he arrived. You're going to end up living here, Marcos. The worst part is, I've already thought about it. I'm sure the dogs snore less than the people at the shelter. But something deeper was happening. Something Marcos could barely admit to himself. For the first time since leaving prison, he didn't feel defined by the worst day of his life. He was no longer just the ex-convict, no longer just the mistake that doesn't deserve a second chance. He was becoming the guy who takes care of the animals, the volunteer who always shows up, the one the dogs like. Small identities, simple ones, but they carried something powerful. They were based on who he was choosing to be now, not on who he had been. However, the real test was still to come. Because there's a difference between dedicating your time to a cause and truly connecting with the lives you were trying to help. And that connection was about to happen in the most unexpected way, with an animal no one could reach. An animal so traumatized, so deeply wounded, that even the most experienced volunteers had given up. An animal that was the perfect reflection of Marcos's own soul. His name was Thor, ironically named because there was nothing powerful about that broken dog. Thor was a 4-year-old Rottweiler. He had arrived at the shelter 6 months before Marcos showed up. He had been used in illegal dog fights. Scars covered his entire body. One ear was torn. Several ribs had been broken and healed crooked, but the worst wounds were invisible. Thor didn't bark, didn't wag his tail, barely moved. He stayed in the darkest corner of the kennel, eyes fixed on nothing, trembling even on warm days. Any approach resulted in a violent reaction. Not an attack, he never lunged, but he growled, bared his teeth, pressed himself against the wall as if expecting to be hit. I've tried everything, Helena confessed to Marcos one day. The vet says he's physically healed, but mentally, I think something inside him was broken beyond repair. What's going to happen to him? No one is going to adopt a dog like that. Aggressive, traumatized, large, and we can't keep him forever. Space is limited. Resources too. She didn't need to finish. Marcos understood. Eventually, if Thor didn't improve, he would have to be euthanized. It was the cruel reality of shelters. Not everyone could be saved. That night, lying in the shelter bed, Marcos couldn't sleep. Thor's image haunted him. Those empty eyes, that body shrinking at the slightest movement. He knew that posture. He had adopted it himself in prison, curling inward, becoming small, invisible, waiting for the pain to pass. He knew that empty look. He had seen it in his own reflection during the first months of freedom, when being free on the outside didn't mean being free inside. Thor wasn't just a traumatized dog. He was a mirror. The next day, Marcos made a decision. Thor would be his project, his mission. I want to take care of him, he told Helena. Thor? Marcos, he's dangerous. You could get hurt. I know, but I want to try. All right, but any problem, you tell me. The first days were exactly as Helena predicted. Difficult, frustrating, painful. Marcos approached Thor's kennel slowly, moved carefully, spoke in a low voice. The dog exploded into growls, pressed himself against the farthest wall, eyes wide with terror. Marcos didn't push. He placed the food, changed the water, cleaned what he could from outside the kennel. And he talked. He always talked. "Hey, Thor, it's just me. I'm not going to hurt you. I brought your food. I know you don't like me. That's okay. You don't have to. I get it, man. I understand being afraid. I understand not trusting. But I'll keep showing up. Every day. You're not alone." The other volunteers thought it was a waste of time. Marina rolled her eyes. Even Helena seemed skeptical. But Marcos persisted. In the second week, Thor stopped growling every time Marcos appeared. He still shrank back, still trembled, but he stayed silent. In the third week, a tiny change. Thor looked directly at Marcos for the first time. Not with anger or fear. With curiosity? Marcos almost cried. "That's it, Thor. That's it. You see me. I'm here." In the fourth week, Marcos began sitting on the ground near the kennel. He didn't try to touch. Didn't go inside. He just sat and talked. He talked about prison, about fear, about waking up every day expecting violence, about learning not to trust anyone, about how hard it is to remember that not everyone wants to hurt you when all you've known is pain. You know, people look at me and see danger. They see someone they think will do harm. It doesn't matter that I've changed. It doesn't matter that I never want to be that person again. They only see who I was. I think you understand that. People look at you and see an aggressive, dangerous dog. They don't see that you're just scared, that you just want the hurting to stop. And then it happened. Thor moved. Not away. Closer. Slowly, trembling, the dog crossed the kennel. He stopped just inches from the bars and looked at Marcos. Not with fear, with recognition. Marcos extended his hand slowly. Thor backed away a little, but didn't run. Marcos kept his hand extended, perfectly still, waiting. Seconds felt like hours. And then, Thor touched his nose to Marcos' hand. Hey, buddy," Marcos whispered, tears streaming down his face. "That's it. I'm not going to hurt you. Ever." In the days that followed, the transformation was visible. Thor started eating better. He began responding when Marcos spoke. Small tail movements, not quite wagging, but close. And Marcos realized something profound. By helping Thor learn to trust again, he himself was relearning how to trust. By showing patience with the dog's wounds, he was being patient with his own. By proving to Thor that change was possible, he was proving it to himself. A week later, Marcos entered the kennel for the first time. Thor didn't attack, didn't flee. He let Marcos sit beside him. And there, in that kennel that smelled of fear and hope, man and animal sat together. Two survivors, two wounded souls. Marcos placed his hand on Thor's rough fur. The dog trembled but didn't pull away. "We're going to be okay," Marcos whispered. "I don't know how, but we will." And in that moment, something magical began to happen. Because when you save someone, you are also saving yourself. And the transformation that was about to happen would not be only Thor's. It would be the shelter's, and everyone who would witness the impossible becoming real. The connection between Marcos and Thor did not go unnoticed. Donna Helena was the first to see it. One day, watching from a distance, she saw Marcos inside the kennel, calmly brushing Thor while the dog remained still, almost relaxed. "That's impossible," she murmured. Marina, standing beside her, had to agree. 6 months trying to get close to that dog, and he did it in 1 month. But it wasn't just Thor. Something bigger was changing. As Thor began to trust, Marcos gained confidence, and he applied the same patience, the same empathy, the same deep understanding to other traumatized animals. There was Mel, a cat who had been burned with cigarettes by her previous owner. She wouldn't let anyone touch her, but Marcos spent hours sitting near her, simply existing in the same space without pressure. 3 weeks later, Mel purred for the first time in months. In his hand, there was Rex, a mixed-breed dog who had lived chained with a leash so short he could barely move. He panicked whenever he saw any kind of rope or collar. Marcos worked with him for months, using only treats and patience, reintroducing the collar centimeter by centimeter. The day Rex allowed the full collar and took his first walk around the block, Marcos had to sit on the sidewalk to keep from breaking down in tears. And the energy changed, not only in the traumatized animals, but in the entire shelter. Marcos began making improvements. Nothing expensive, he had no money, but creative. He used discarded wood from a nearby construction site to repair deteriorated kennels. He created shaded areas with old tarps supported by structures he welded himself, a skill learned in a prison course. He implemented a rotation system. Animals kept in smaller kennels got turned in a larger space he fenced off at the back of the property. It wasn't perfect, but it gave the dogs a chance to run, to feel grass under their paws. Other volunteers began to help. Inspired by Marcos's dedication, they showed up more often. They brought donations. One, a plumber, fixed the water system for free. Another, an electrician, repaired the wiring that constantly failed. The shelter was being reborn. "I don't know what you did, Marcos," Helena said one day, looking around. "But this place, it's different. Better. It wasn't just me. It was everyone. No, it was you. You set the example. And people follow examples, not speeches." Marcos had never thought of himself that way. Never seen himself as an example of anything. On the contrary, he had spent years believing he was an example of what not to do. But there he was, transforming a space, influencing people, making a real difference. Even Marina completely changed her attitude. One day, she approached while Marcos was cleaning the puppy kennel. "I owe you an apology." Marcos stopped, surprised. "I judged you, harshly, and I was wrong. You were being cautious. That's normal." "No, I was being prejudiced. I saw your past and decided it was all you were. But you proved me wrong. Every single day, you prove me wrong. Thank you for not giving up, even with people like me making things harder. Thank you for giving me a second chance to change my opinion. Not everyone does that." From that day on, Marina and Marcos became partners. She taught socialization techniques learned from years of volunteering. He contributed infinite patience and a unique understanding of emotional wounds. Together, they achieved results that seemed impossible. Animals that arrived, completely broken, began to recover faster. Adoption rates increased. Visitors commented on the different energy of the place. "It feels like the animals here are happier," one visitor said. And they were, because the humans caring for them were more present, more dedicated, more hopeful. The shelter still had peeling walls, patch kennels, limited resources. None of that had changed. But there was something new, something invisible, yet tangible. There was love. There was purpose. There was the belief that every living being, no matter how wounded, deserves dignity and a second chance. And that belief was radiating beyond the shelter's gates. It was beginning to change human lives as well. Because while Marcos was transforming that space was transforming him back, in ways he hadn't yet fully realized. But that would soon become impossible to ignore. 6 months after starting as a volunteer, Marcos looked at himself in the mirror of the shelter's bathroom and barely recognized the man staring back at him. It wasn't just the stronger body from constant physical work. It wasn't just the shoulders that were less hunched, the posture that was less defensive. It was the look, the eyes that had left prison empty, dead inside, now had something different, something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. Marcos didn't notice the change as it happened. It was gradual, silent, like a plant growing. You don't see it move, but one day you realize it's bigger. He stopped waking up with that weight on his chest, that feeling of why even get up. Now he woke up thinking, "They must be waiting. The new puppies need special attention. Dona Helena said a big donation is coming. I need to organize it." He had reasons. Small, simple, but powerful. The week in construction, jobs changed too. Before, Marcos endured the suspicious looks of other workers in submissive silence. Now, he greeted them with his head held high. He talked when spoken to. He proudly told them about the shelter when someone asked what he did during the week. "I work with abandoned animals," he would say, and for the first time, he didn't feel ashamed talking about himself. One day, something extraordinary happened. Marcos was at the bus stop, heading back from the shelter, when a young woman approached him. "Excuse me, are you Marcos from the animal shelter?" He froze. How did she know his name? "I am. I adopted a little pet from there, Mel. The orange cat. Dona Helena said you were the one who took care of her, that she was very traumatized." Marcos remembered. Mel, the burn cat. The one who took months to trust. How is she? Amazing. Completely different. She sleeps in my bed, plays, purrs all day. My therapist said she's helped me more than years of therapy. And I wanted to thank you. She extended her hand. Marcos shook it, still processing. You gave her a second chance, and she changed my life. So, thank you. Truly. The woman walked away. Marcos stood there at the bus stop, his hand still hanging in the air where the handshake had been. Someone had thanked him. Someone had recognized something good he had done. Marcos sat down on the bench and cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from realization, from finally, feeling that his existence had positive value in the world. That night, Marcos did something he hadn't done since before prison. He called one of his brothers. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Marcos almost hung up. Hello. Rafa, it's me. Marcos. Marcos? Val. How long has it been? A long time. I know. I'm sorry for disappearing. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm working with animals, helping a shelter. I'm trying to be someone you don't feel ashamed of. His brother's voice trembled. I was never ashamed of you, man. I just didn't know how to help. How to reach you. I know. But now, I think I reach myself. You know? Like, I found myself again. I'm happy, man. Really happy. Can we meet? I want to see this shelter. Really. 2 weeks later, Rafael visited. He brought his wife and his young daughter. The niece Marcos had never met. Dona Helena welcomed the family with coffee and homemade cake. Marcos showed them the shelter, introduced the animals, told the rescue stories, the transformations, the challenges. Rafael watched his brother with tear-filled eyes. This isn't the guy I visited in prison. This is my brother back. The 5-year-old niece fell in love with Thor. Despite the size, the past, the scars, Thor was gentle. He let her pet his head, sat patiently while she chatted about her day at school. He's beautiful, Uncle Marcos. He is, and very brave. Marcos looked at Thor, the dog no one thought would improve, who was too dangerous, too traumatized, too lost. And now he was there, letting a small child pet him, his tail softly wagging. If Thor could change that much, if those animals could overcome such deep trauma, why couldn't Marcos? No, he already had changed. He was no longer the man who committed that robbery out of desperation and bad choices. He was no longer the prisoner, counting days in silence. He was no longer the invisible ex-con nobody wanted around. He was Marcos, volunteer, protector of wounded animals, brother, uncle, friend, someone who woke up every day and chose to do good, someone worthy of a second chance. And for the first time since leaving prison, Marcos believed that, completely. But believing in yourself is only half the journey. The other half is making the world believe too. And that was about to happen in a way he never imagined. 3 months after his brother's visit, Dona Helena walked into the shelter holding a local newspaper, her expression unreadable. Have you seen this? Seen what? She opened the paper to the community section. There was a photo of the shelter, and another photo of Marcos crouched beside Thor. The headline read, "Former prisoner transforms animal shelter and his own life through compassion." Helena, I didn't authorize this. I didn't know. Read it. She interrupted gently but firmly. Marcos read. It was Marina's story. She had written to the newspaper about the shelter, about the transformations, about how a man with a complicated past had become the soul of the place. When Marcos arrived, I judged him by the worst day of his life. I saw only the criminal, not the man. But he taught me that redemption is not an empty word. It is daily work. It is choosing every single day to be better than yesterday. Animals don't care about your past. They care about who you are now, how you treat them now. Maybe humans should learn that lesson. The article ended with a request, donations for the shelter and volunteers to help the mission. She told everything. About prison, about me. She told the truth, Helena corrected. About who you were and who you became. Both matter. Marcos didn't know how to feel. Exposed. Vulnerable. But also seen. Truly seen. In the days that followed, The shelter's phone didn't stop ringing. Some calls were negative, unfortunately. People saying criminals shouldn't work with animals. That was dangerous. That Helena was irresponsible. But most were different. Donations started arriving. Bags of food, blankets, medicine, money for repairs. A local veterinarian offered free services once a week. New volunteers showed up. Not all stayed, but many did. And something even more incredible, adoption requests skyrocketed. The story had touched people. They wanted to know the shelter where second chances happened, for animals and humans. A retired man adopted Rex, the dog who had lived chained. If he can overcome trauma, I can overcome my loneliness after my wife passed, he said. A teacher adopted 3 elderly cats no one wanted. I read the article and thought, if that man can change lives by giving second chances, so can I. Marcos started receiving messages. People with family members in prison saying the story gave them hope. Former prisoners from other cities asking for advice on how to start over. One day, a 16-year-old boy showed up at the shelter. My dad is in prison. He gets out in 2 years. I read him the article about you. He cried, said if you made it, he can too. Can I volunteer here? I want to understand what it means to give a second chance, so I can give one to my dad when he gets out. Marcos looked at the boy. He saw the younger brother he had almost abandoned by going to prison. He saw the niece he hadn't watched grow up. Yes, you can, and I'll teach you everything I've learned. Weeks turned into months. The shelter thrived. Animals once considered unadoptable found homes. The structure improved constantly, but the most impactful change was invisible. People started treating Marcos differently on the street. Some recognized him from a newspaper photo. Instead of stepping away in fear or suspicion, they greeted him, asked about the animals, thanked him for his work. The owner of a bakery where Marcos bought bread offered him a job. Nothing fancy, baker's assistant, but it's honest work with a contract, hours that still let you help at the shelter in the afternoon. Why? You know that I know. I read the article, and I know people who adopted animals from there. My own daughter adopted one. Anyone who dedicates their life to caring for those nobody wants, that's someone you can trust. Marcos accepted. For the first time in almost a year of freedom, he had a formal job. He left the shelter, rented a small room of his own. It wasn't luxury, but it was dignified. It was his, earned through work and character. Marina organized a barbecue at the shelter to celebrate the achievements. Volunteers, adoptive families, neighbors, everyone gathered. Thor was there, without a muzzle, calmly interacting with dozens of people. The same creature no one could touch months earlier without risk. When Marcos arrived here, Helena said, emotionally, I gave him a chance because I give second chances to animals every day. I thought I should do the same for humans. But I was wrong about one thing. I didn't give him a chance. He did. He showed up every day, worked without expecting anything in return, loved the most wounded animals with patience I've never seen. He earned the chance and taught us that redemption is not a gift. It's construction. People toasted, laughed, shared stories, and for a few hours in that yard full of animals and humans, all carrying stories of pain overcome. There was no judgment, no past defining the present, only community, connection, hope. Marcos looked around the celebration. At Thor, sleeping peacefully at a child's feet. At Marina, laughing as a cat played with her hair. At Helena, smiling with genuine pride. At his brother, who had brought the whole family. And he realized something that changed everything. He was no longer trying to prove he deserved a second chance. He already had it. He was living it every day, and now it was time to help others find theirs too. There's a moment in every journey of transformation when you stop and ask, why me? Why did this happen to me? For Marcos, that moment came on a quiet night, 6 months after the barbecue. He was sitting in the small yard of his rented home, Thor lying at his feet. Yes, Thor now lived with him. No one had adopted the Rottweiler. Not because he hadn't improved. He had become a completely different dog. But people still saw the scars, the size, the breed associated with danger. So Marcos asked to adopt him. Helena almost cried when she approved. You two were made for each other from the beginning, she said. That night, Marcos stroked Thor's head and thought about everything. In prison, he had taken courses, read books, tried to prepare for a fresh start. But none of that had worked on the outside. No certification had opened doors. What changed everything wasn't technical knowledge. It was compassion. It was seeing creatures as wounded as he was and choosing to help without expecting anything in return. It was putting the needs of those animals above his own comfort. It was persisting even when everyone doubted, himself included. And Marcos understood the lesson that the universe or God or fate, whatever controls these things, was trying to teach him. Redemption doesn't come from erasing the past. It comes from building a present so meaningful that the past becomes just a chapter, not the whole story. He thought of all the people who had crossed his path since he started at the shelter. The teenager with a father in prison, who now volunteered 3 times a week and was getting better grades because he had purpose. The elderly woman who adopted an old cat and said that for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The veterinarian who began offering free services because he was inspired by Marcos' story and realized he wanted to make a difference beyond making money. Each of those lives touched. Each animal that found a home. Each volunteer who discovered purpose. None of it would have happened if Marcos hadn't taken that first frightened step through the shelter's gate. And he realized everyone deserves a second chance. Not because they're perfect, not because they've learned their lesson, but simply because they're capable of choosing differently from now on. The shelter animals didn't ask to be abandoned. They didn't choose trauma, but they deserved love, care, a home, simply for existing. In the same way, humans who make mistakes, big mistakes, who hurt, who disappoint, are still human. They still carry the capacity to change. That doesn't mean forgetting consequences. Marcos served his sentence. He would carry the moral weight of what he did forever. But it also doesn't mean the consequence should be eternal social prison. Eternal impossibility of starting over. Because if society never forgives, never welcomes back, never makes space for real change, why would anyone try to change? If Marcos hadn't found a shelter, if Helena had closed the door that first day, if no one had given even a small chance, he probably would have given up, gone back to crime, proven the skeptics right. But she did give a chance, and he took it, and everything changed. And Marcos understood that his mission now went beyond animals. It was to show other former prisoners that a path exists. It was to show society that people can truly change. It was to prove that compassion, the real kind, the difficult kind, the kind that requires looking beyond the surface, can transform everything. He began visiting prisons. First, the one he had been in. He told his story, listened to others, offered tangible hope, not empty promises. When you get out, he said, no one will make it easy. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It means you'll have to work twice as hard. You'll have to prove yourself when no one believes. But it is possible. I am proof. And the eyes of those incarcerated men and women began to shine differently. Hope is contagious. Marcos also started speaking at schools. Not romanticizing anything, but being real. I committed a crime. I went to prison. I lost years of my life, my mother's goodbye, my family's trust. Don't do what I did. But if you already did, know this, it's not over. You can come back. And the central message, the one he repeated in every talk, was always the same. You're not the worst thing you've ever done. You're the best choice you can still make. The past explains, but it does not define. Pain doesn't have to become destiny. People don't change because they're humiliated. They change because someone believed when it was easier to give up. If a man marked by prison bars found freedom by caring for those nobody wanted, then there is always a path, even when the world insists there isn't. In the end, redemption isn't about deserving it. It's about choosing every day to be better than yesterday. And if this story touched you in any way, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like Marcos's, stories that show compassion can change real lives, need to keep being told. Sometimes everything begins with a simple gesture, someone who doesn't turn away, and a single chance that changes everything.